record and
yeah, Renee, I tried to record and obviously failed.
well, hello there, Elizabeth Riley. How are you today?
Hi, I love seeing you every day this time. It makes me have something more to look forward to. Sitting outside of our house for an hour.
I share that sentiment with you. And today I know we're both just honored to have our guest with us today, Mr. Carl Carter, founder and executive director of the Beverly Carter Foundation. Carl, we are so grateful to spend some time with you today.
So good to see you.
The honor is all mine. It's so good to see you both.
So
you guys know this about me. I'm a hugger, so I can't wait till I see you again. And
I know, all of us are. We're also touchy-feely. It's one of those things we're like, oh my gosh, group hug. So we'll make sure we get a couple extra ones in next time.
Absolutely.
Carl, would you please share about yourself and share with the audience just all about the foundation and your mom? Just share it all. You have so many wonderful things that you're working on right now.
Yeah, so I'm so honored to. So my name is Carl Carter, and I am coming to you from Little Rock, Arkansas. And believe it or not, we have internet and shoes and teeth here. It gets a bad rep, but it's an amazing place. And I am so heavily involved in this organization that origins come from tragedy. I will spin, this is kind of the only room in my house that we have this. It's kind of awkwardly large photo of my mom there that was from, someone had it printed for her for a funeral. And so I have it here as people enter my home, they see it. And that sweet lady was Beverly Carter. Already getting emotional. It's gonna be a fun hour, friends.
We're with you.
I love you guys. So she was a real estate agent here in Little Rock, and she was just the agent I think that we all aspire to be. She had an infectious energy and passion for real estate, and she made it look easy, which is just so frustrating for people like me that, me and my, I always joke, typically I have the opportunity to do these face-to-face, and I say, guys, after we talk safety, I'm going to be your real estate coach because I closed a whopping 3 transactions last year, and I know that's awe-inspiring. So as much as I am my mother's son, I did not follow in her footsteps from the sales approach, but she was such a great agent, and she had been in the business for about a dozen years. And she was even a real estate educator. So she had a passion for mentoring new agents and really taking them under her wing and showing them how to be successful. And a self-proclaimed scaredy cat, honestly. She was very mindful about not only educating others, but also about safety. Something that I'm a little, I've never shared this because I've never wanted it, and you guys know, and this is a safe space, and you guys know how much I love my mama. But my mom, right before she was taken from us while working, she had been off work for a little bit. She had an elective surgery done, and so you guys know how this business is. If you're not, got to keep it going, or you can really hit a dry spell. And there's always kind of been that lingering thing of, had it not been for that dry spell, would maybe decisions have been taken differently, or would the intuition have been trusted stronger? And I don't mean that to point out my mama, because she's my mama and she's perfect. But it parallels in my mind anyway to where we find ourselves right now. And, I'm a realtor, my wife's a realtor. We own a hair salon that we have 12 stylists that work at our salon. Real estate's come to a halt for us here. All these lives that depend upon our salon are at a halt. And so it's just, I get emotional because I think about how to inspire people to stay strong and to be safe and not make reckless decisions because we know these bills are coming in. but I digress a bit. Back to my mama. She, here in the Little Rock area, she began working with two people that were posing as clients anyway. The great people we work with every day should never be associated in any way with these people. She had been contacted by a husband and wife. And if we can kind of put ourselves in the situation that my mom was in, and so I kind of imagine you begin getting phone calls, text, and emails from a husband and wife. They give you their first, their last name. They tell you their story, that they're moving in from out of state. They're relocating due to work. Really need to get into a property quickly because they're in a temporary housing situation they're really not happy with. Super friendly. You're talking to both husband and wife. They're very familiar. And by the familiar, I just mean their tone is very friendly as as I look back on the emails and the texts that they exchanged with my mom, they really talked to her as though she was a friend. And of course she did with them. And to kind of further that story, and they also told her that they were cash buyers. And I know for so many agents, and I'll put myself on the hot seat here, I didn't become an agent until after I lost my mom. And so I really try so hard every day to practice what I preach. And I know personally how awkward, for those of us that are new agents, how hard it can be to ask for proof of funds for cash buyers. It's real easy to be John Wayne, I think, on these, internet threads. And we're just like, oh, I ask every time. And it's like, well, if we're honest, sometimes it can be a little awkward if we don't manage that conversation from the start. So anyway, so that's their story. And my mom did like we all do. You're really trying to find them the best property. And she had, kept a file on this couple, and she had handwritten all these things down. And not only was that good from a safety perspective on kind of keeping this good log of the conversations that had been had, but you could also see really the tragedy of this beautiful professional that was just seeking so hard to help serve these people.
Carl, can I ask you? Can I ask you the time from which your mom first met this husband and wife? How long? Because if my understanding is correct, there was quite a while that she was building a relationship with them. It seemed to me when you shared your story in San Francisco, when I heard it in person, it seemed they were almost grooming her like this in this disgusting way.
Yeah, their behavior truly was predatory. This process of when those phone calls, text, emails first began up until that first showing, this was almost 2 weeks. And this wasn't a Pop-Tart move where you're calling for my listing and I'm going to jump in the car. This, like you said, Renee, it really was a process. But to that point, when my mom did agree to show them that first house, there had never been a face-to-face meeting. There hadn't even been something like this, of course. There hadn't been an exchange of identification. So although there was this familiarity, we've been talking for a couple of weeks, there really had been nothing to really verify the identity of these people. She had no idea. The names were bogus. The phone number and the texts as they came through were through, this smartphone app that gave them a spoof number. She had no idea, of course, any of us, we don't necessarily think about the fact that just because you get an email from John Smith at Gmail, that the person on the other end of that email address name might not be John Smith. We can just go in there and just put any name we want to.
But you're also not thinking about the worst in people, right? I mean, as real estate agents, our job is to serve. Everything you're describing about your mom and this husband, wife, and they're moving and they're in temporary housing, that is a very common theme that we all experience, right? And those conversations, and a lot of times if people are just, fishing, they go silent. But for them to continue this for 2 weeks, your mom was serving. She was putting her best foot forward for these people. And so why would you ever experience or expect that somebody is going through these lengths like they were doing? That would have never crossed my mind either. whether I was in the business a long time or a new agent. I mean, we've been in the business a long time. That doesn't cross your mind typically. You don't expect that people are going to have those ambitions or those motivations.
Right, right. And I'll tell you, something that, a few things that, we're taught from a safety perspective in vetting new clients and doing your due diligence, aside from the meet in a public place or, exchange identification and keep that secure, there are just some kind of anecdotal, quick internet search type things that you can do, right? So you do the Google stuff, you do to see if they have a Facebook profile, to see if they have any, not that you can tell a lot by a Facebook profile, but you can see, is there an account? Do they have any quirks? Whatever. And so evidence was found on the laptop of these bad people that took my mom from me, that kind of to your point, that we don't know why my mom specifically, but we know that whether it was her marketing or they had seen her around town, something about my mom to them spoke rich, and they were able to tell, probably through marketing, that she was a real estate broker. And so when questioned multiple times, the bad guys, why Beverly? Why did you do this? How did you pick this lady? You didn't know her. Why? What was all this about? And they said she was, and they've said this a number of ways, but it all comes back to two things. She was rich and she was a broker, which means the reason for the broker point is, in their mind, she was not only rich, but she worked in a profession where we could get her a loan. And so let me just, to back up to that rich point. So our family is not, and it's kind of the uncomfortable truth that we all have to face in this industry. I joked earlier, real estate is really kind of a side thing for me. So, I did only do 3 transactions last year, but because I have that R by my name, there is a perception of wealth and affluence from that. And so that was very much the case with my mom. But what they wanted to do is that they wanted to, back to the point of what we typically do as a safety measure to do the searches. Evidence was found on their laptop that they had gone, sought my mom's internet profile out as best they could. They went to her Facebook profile to verify that she was married and to see what they could find out about her wealth from that. They did Google searches on her. And then they also, and this, for whatever reason, this always is the eeriest thing to me, they knew to go to our county records here in Central Arkansas and search by her name to find out where she lived and the property value of the home she lived in. All this was an effort to kind of prove that she was as wealthy as she appeared to be. Of course, none of that really does any of that, right?
Wow.
But for those people that might not know my mom's story, the reason why it's important to find and kidnap a rich realtor is so that you can hold them for ransom. And they, this not my words, they perceived her from just those things that I just told you. That gave them enough in their mind to perceive that she was so wealthy that they would be able to get enough money from ransom from my dad that they would literally never have to work again. And which of course is absurd, right? And so, after a couple of weeks of my mom trying to find properties, sending them properties, she signed them up for, the email notifications from the MLS. And after a couple of weeks, they reached out to see the property, the one where she was taken. And the property was one that they had found. One thing that they hadn't really anticipated is that my mom was very familiar with that property. It was a bank-owned property. It had been sitting there a long time. There had been issues with squatters, and just the yucky yucks had gotten in there and even, ripped everything of value, the fixtures down to the copper, poor house was a mess. The house at that time didn't have much of an internet presence. So as they reached out, that actually kind of helped their case, because they said, hey, we're interested. Mom was like, oh, but there wasn't like, hey, go look through these, these 40 MLS photos and you'll see this is a waste of your time. And so we know in that conversation that my mom and I love sharing this safety tip. And there's so many safety tips we get that my mom actually did, not things we learned from after the fact. She knew it and she did it. Is that something about that phone conversation, whenever that husband called to see that house that day, she felt something. And so she, in that call, made up a company policy, and she said, hey, I'm so sorry, but company policy prohibits me from showing property alone in a rural area. And, maybe my mom was doing that because of intuition, because of just the sound of the guy's voice on the other end of the phone. Maybe she was doing that because she knew it would be a waste of her time. We'll never know. We'll never know. But we do know that there was some hesitancy. We also know that to counter her objection, that he handed the phone to his wife. And the wife said, hey, I'm going to be coming from work. Would your company be okay if the three of us meet there? And, it's at this point, whenever I'm in a room full of agents, there's this heaviness that sits across the room, because it's like, oh no, that's where they get all of us. Because, and I shouldn't say all of us, that's where they get the good 90% of us. Because how often is the first time we're meeting, when we're talking about husband and wife, we're all coming from different places. And that's where my mom's story really starts resonating with people, I think, is that I would have done the same thing Beverly did. Others taking precautions.
There's a misconception, right? There's a misconception when we think about, and you are, I have to back up, but you are right. When I saw you speak in San Francisco in November, it literally happened that way. The whole room took a sigh, and we all felt the gravity of it, because what you describe happens 7 days a week for all realtors. And there's a misconception that, well, if it's a husband and wife, then I should be safe. And that is absolutely not the case. I think that
right.
It resonates with agents.
Right? It's not like, oh, she got a call that day, didn't know who John and Joe were, and just jumped in, went and showed the property. They had, like you said, groomed for multiple weeks. So she felt like she kind of knew them. We would have, I see myself in that same position.
Yeah. And she did, I always say it's so tragic, because she did so many things right, but it just wasn't quite enough to keep her from being taken from us. Even down to before she went to show the house that day, she even told my dad, hey, this house that she was showing was just around, it was a lakefront property just around the lake from where my parents live. And so Dad knew exactly where she was going to be, exact time she's going to be showing. And so when she wasn't returning his phone calls, texts, he calls me. And, if you can imagine your kids interacting with your spouses, and your spouse is, and your kids, I should say, are probably be like me in that moment, where it's just like, now, come on, Dad, this is real estate. We know how this goes. She's writing a contract. They've called the family and they're doing a second showing, like, just chill out. And, but just the worry in his voice was really, I just knew that I needed to act, and it would be cold and callous for me to just dismiss him. And so, of course, he arrived at that house after realizing that upon getting there, and Mom, it's crazy. I mean, she got there early. She made a number of business phone calls from the driveway of this property. It's believed, and I'll get to this in just a moment, that she had, gotten there early, walked through the home, unlocked the home, and then went back to her car to continue making, some phone calls. And at 6 p.m., which she had set the appointment for, because it was a late September day, the days start getting shorter. This house has no utilities, so you got to see it in the daylight. And 6 o'clock rolls around, and a black car pulls in the driveway. A young Caucasian male with short, dark hair gets out and approaches this blonde lady, which is my mom. And we know separately that as he approached my mom, he began apologizing and saying, I'm so sorry, but my wife has gotten caught up at work and she's not going to be able to join us today. However, we have a big favor to ask you, and that is that as we, would you go ahead and show me this property? And as we walk through the property, because there are so few photographs of this property online, and truly, I even saw for myself, this home at the time that Mom was showing it only had 5 photos on Zillow. The leading photo was beautiful, but the 4 following were taken with a camera phone or something, and were just, just not good quality. And so my sweet mom, she agreed to do that. And I can't speak to what it was like in that room, Renee, when we were there in San Francisco, but I know every time I tell the story, and I know at this point, this is the last moment that my mom, that a business decision has the opportunity to save her. This is the last moment, and I know just from knowing her and being a human that when this request was thrown upon her at the last minute, that there had to have been a burning in her stomach, even if just for a moment, just like, gosh, this isn't what we agreed to. This is weird. Now I've got to take photos and text them to your wife as we go through this property and answer her questions. And that was part of their thing, is let's ask her if she will take these photos for us and send them to the wife who's sitting off in another place, and which keeps my mom distracted. And so my mom made the decision to do that. And I'll tell you, friends, like, probably the eeriest thing I've ever seen is at the end of the trial, so these bad people are in prison now, but we got my mom's phone back. And my mom's phone had been found in the home of these bad people. And so, if you can imagine, you've suddenly been given this treasure trove of memories and conversations that your precious loved one has. And so you're just like, you're just taking it all in. And then you see the last 10 photos on her camera roll, or the interior of that house. I mean, she was literally documenting the last moments of her freedom, and she had no idea. And as my mom took the last photo, which is of a bedroom in that home, she was met with a taser in her side. And Renee's seen this before, but this most ridiculous lime green duct tape. And she was caught off guard. There was no, I'm from very well-intended people. I'm constantly given the what ifs, and if your mom had. There were a lot of decisions that led to this moment and being taken by surprise with a taser in her side. There was no opportunity to run. There was no opportunity to do quick draw, of a firearm. She just found herself in a very bad spot. And that bad guy took this tape and after tasing her, he wrapped it entirely around her head, over her eyes, and entirely around her head, over her mouth. Her hands behind her back, her ankles together. And I know when we hear things like that, it doesn't even sound like real life. It just sounds like I'm telling you about a movie I saw. This bad guy then goes outside, gets in his car, turns his car around, backs it up to the house, opens the trunk. And I give you all those details because I think, real estate aside, I always encourage people to go home to their families, but the fact is now we're all home, right? And so the likelihood of emergencies or even victimization within your homes, the risk is actually a lot higher now than it normally is. And so something that I always beg and plead of the audience is that what I told you about from this story with the 6 o'clock and that black car pulling up, and a young Caucasian male with short dark hair gets out, greets the blonde lady, and then pick that story back up. Moments later, comes outside, gets in his car, turns the car around, opens the trunk, and then drives off. That's all they saw. But every bit of that part of the story was witnessed firsthand by the next door neighbor. But that didn't come out until detectives were walking the neighborhood that night after mom had already been reported missing. The neighbor didn't want to appear nosy or that they were interfering with a business they had nothing to do with. And so I always ask of everyone that if there's a conversation to have with your family over dinner tonight, it's just, if you see something suspicious, just report it. Just report it. But that bad guy, he took my mom to another spot, and he made her do a video. And so their plan all along was to get all this money, right? But they wanted to do it electronically. And so they wanted to request the money via video. They were going to use their cell phones, those spoof numbers that they had been interacting with my mom. They were going to use that same technology to deliver the videos from my mom to the bad people, from the bad people to my dad. And then also their plan was for all this wealth that they were going to get, their plan was to have my dad push all this wealth to accounts that were accessible via cards in my mom's purse that day. And I tell you, people, almost a universal truth. It's among female agents is that whenever I say, ladies, I only have to tell you today, for safety and security reasons, you already probably don't show property with a purse on your shoulder. Even if it's not even safety and security, it's just practicality of having, lugging something else along. And my mom, for whatever reason, didn't either. She had locked it, left it locked in her car, like so many of you ladies do, in good safety. But from the time that bad person took off with my mom in the trunk of his car, their plan was, he had forgotten the purse, the plan was already ruined, and he didn't even know it. But not even
they left in their car, right? Leaving your mom's vehicle in the driveway of the property.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So when my dad arrived on the property that night, he found my mom's car locked. And then once he was able to get inside, went back home, got the extra set of keys, he found that client profile folder that my mom had, which was actually a very damning piece of evidence in the trial because she had documented, it was just incredible, all the things she had documented, kids' names and their interests. It was just service, just up here, the kind of service we all aspire to. She didn't want to forget anything. And so they had this video that was never delivered to my dad, but one in that video was to set the precursor, the don't call the cops, and the typical things that you can expect. But the plan was to get very specific. However, whenever that happened, the bad guy had gotten home and he had locked my mom up in their bathroom, and then it was this realization that we don't have the purse, we don't have the vehicle to get this wealth. And so their plan was to come back to the property that night and get my mom's purse. And that when the bad guy arrived that night to the scene to get the purse so that he could get all this wealth, he arrived on a scene to see at least half a dozen detective cars with blue lights flashing and all the vehicles from my entire family. We were all standing out there not realizing the bad guy himself had returned to the scene of the crime to try to get the purse. And this isn't a telling part of this story, and this isn't something that I've just concocted. This is something that I've heard time and time again from law enforcement, is that in this industry, we have to do enough to take the anonymity from anyone we're working with. It's not acceptable for us to be conducting business and me not have proof, at least on some level, of who you are. And of course, it's not fair to sellers either that we would have complete strangers walking to their house, but that's a whole other topic we could talk about another day. But like, so my point here in this situation is these bad people, as ludicrous to the good people on this Zoom today, we would never do it. But they did it because they thought they could get away with it, and they have these sociopathic tendencies to strip a person of their humanity. And when he arrived on the scene that night and he saw the blue light and he saw that he wasn't going to be able to get the purse, all of a sudden, this panic of, I don't want to go back to prison. And the detectives and different law enforcement I've spoken to for the years, they say, this is really not that uncommon. They think the criminals think they have the best and the brightest plan until it begins to fall apart. And then you see them make these huge leaps to go from this trashy ransom that would have never worked to this leap of, let's just take what we can from her right now and end her life. And, these people, and I never say this to upset anyone, but it really makes a point of how people can dehumanize that they can do these types of crimes. They took my mom's, she had some cash in her pocket. Evidently they took that. They took my mom's jewelry, her wedding band. She was wearing a bracelet. They took the wife, as disgusting as this is, she liked the shirt, the blouse that my mom was showing property in that day. So they took the blouse. The blouse was found hanging in the home of these bad people. It is just disgusting. And, using that same tape that they had abducted her with, that ridiculous tape that our kids all use for craft projects. Why do you need lime green duct tape? They used it to apply strips to my mom's face until she could no longer breathe. And video footage was found of them at a local retail store purchasing a shovel. And they took my mom to the backside of what I call a concrete plant, where they store the trucks and wash these big concrete trucks out after jobs. And the backside of that private property, they dug a shallow grave, and they buried my mom in an attempt to make all this go away whenever they realized it wasn't going to work. As I said earlier, these bad people, they were caught through amazing detective work, and they are in prison. Most recently, I found out that you have ups and downs with these types of criminals and career criminals, and so the wife has started the formal process of requesting clemency from our state governor. I have no fear that won't happen, but it won't go away. You kind of think and hope that once justice has been served, that these things will stop. The husband is in prison for 2 life sentences for capital murder and for kidnapping. And so,
Carl, this is an opportunity too, because I've been keeping track as much as possible with the work that you're doing in the Beverly Carter Foundation that you've since founded in your mom's name. What can we as realtors, what can anyone who loves or knows a realtor do with this one person who is now trying for clemency from the governor? Is there anything we can do in support?
So thank you for bringing that up. There is. So it won't be an official hearing, but the board will perform a kind of a first level review process in early July of this year. And what I am coordinating is that I am sending hopefully a big box of letters from people that feel strongly enough to protest this. And so I have quite a collection going, and I'll say, I just for the sake of time, unfortunately, I can't go into it, but I can promise you, I could give a keynote on my love for this industry. You know, and I always say transactions get wonky sometimes, and things get crazy across, you know, the other side of the desk when we're trying to work things, and you can't get people to answer their phone or whatever it may be. I believe wholeheartedly that real estate, the industry, is what led to my mother being found, us getting justice, and continuing to put the heat on the whole situation, not only from an agent perspective for our big real estate family, but also for the aftermath. So I had to say that because I'm pretty emotional. I can't even paint the picture for you right now, but if you can picture, those of you that are familiar with farmlands like soybean fields, and you can picture these gorgeous real estate agents arm in arm, stomping through these murky, yucky soybean fields, probably terrified, and but looking and searching for my mom, and we haven't stopped. And you know, these efforts. So I get fired up. But if you feel strongly about the topic, and you would like to be a part of helping us protest this clemency, BeverlyCarterFoundation.org. On our website, you will find the post office box for our organization. If you can submit a letter, it can be super simple. It just needs to identify who you are, that you protest this clemency and request. And it would be helpful if you list my mother by name, and because that's really what it's all about. Is it's not about the rehabilitation of this person that committed the crime. Our standpoint is about the consequence of a crime and the life that we lost. So thank you for bringing that up, Renee. So I will say, in the aftermath of losing Mom, it always seems to take forever for you to get to trial, and new evidence was being found, and this, you're going through this, a very public battle. And so not only, we found ourselves in a situation that not only was Mom taken from us, the matriarch of our family, the life, the center, the fun, the personality of our family was just taken. Then we have to do this public battle where the bad guys are really, especially the husband, tarnishing her name. And so I started just speaking out, and I promise you, I was like any of your kids would be. I was just like, no, that's my mom. She was my first love. My mom had me since she was 16. Like, we grew up together. Like, we ran 5Ks together. Like, she was my girl. Like, and continues to be. But what happened is that through those conversations, you begin kind of attracting your tribe, and people will begin relating to you, and never expected it to turn really into an agent safety dialogue. But what happened is that people would start reaching out to me, and they would be so amazing and kind and say the nicest things about my mom and offering their condolences. But what would happen then is that they would say, here's how I've been victimized. Here's how I was raped while I was showing property. Or here's how I've been stalked while in this business because some creep. Or here's how, I was holding an open house, and then I had to be the one to have the conversation with my sellers because all the prescription drugs came up missing, or a firearm came up missing. And just on, you guys know, you've been in the business for a long time, like having these conversations and being the beacon for it, it became a heavy burden for me to bear. Because not only did I lose my mom, but then I started feeling personally a little bit responsible for being a part of the solution of these amazing people that had nowhere to turn. Because we have such great liberty in our independent contractor status, but sometimes there's a little that can come with that too, because you are an independent contractor. So for certain things that employees benefits might get, that they might get, you may not have that. So,
well, that's a good segue too, Carl, if we talk about, okay, so realtors, we must put continued pressure on this conversation of realtor safety. And when Elizabeth and I shared conversation, just she and I, about how honored we would be to have you come on, is the Beverly Carter Foundation is putting pressure on that conversation. And can you talk about what you and I shared together in San Francisco was agents come from fear to implement protocols because they're afraid they're going to lose the transaction or the customer. And we must stop that. Both the customers need to understand that there are protocols we have in place for everyone's safety, and the realtors need to stand together and say, we're not afraid, we're going to implement these safety precautions.
yeah, so what I found is that, you know, after that, just feeling that the mounting, what I felt, I took it on as personal pressure that I will be a part of the solution. And so I created this nonprofit. And then I started looking around, to your point, Renee, where I saw that not only was there this fear of losing a transaction from agents, but from where I was sitting, those that were trying to get safer practices within the industry, from where I sat, they seemed to be coming from a place of fear as well. Let's just scare the mess out of everybody. And I'm the first to admit my mom's story is scary, and any of us thinking about ourselves in that position, absolutely. But I also know that my mom would thump me on the head if she knew that I was traveling the country scaring people, because fear does nothing but divide us and make us do things that we wouldn't normally do, as you guys know. So to that point, our nonprofit seeks to inspire change and empower people through education. So we are a 501c3. It is a little odd because, and I use the word odd, but I use it softly, I promise. But for a 501c3, sit kind of in the middle of an industry that is thought of as just being so sales and profit oriented. And of course, we know that real estate is so much more than that. But from a public perspective, it can be interesting to navigate. And so what we work to do is one, to your point, Renee, about not only educating agents on ways to conduct their business in safer, more efficient manners that will help save their time and go through good processes, but also through consumer awareness as well. You know, something that a huge opportunity, I'll say, for our industry is that no one wants to be off-putting to the consumer. And so you don't see the big dudes, the big brands, up to and including, I think, even our big brand that we're all a member of. There is just there's a very careful mindset about not being pushing the consumer back. But to that point, I think that right now this is a great time for all agents, because we're at home. You could start with educating your care and concern related to the virus, and that the safety for our consumers related to the virus, and then keep the conversation going. Your platform starts right now, and then you can begin having conversations with, even if you get a new listing. One thing that, it's always interesting is that, your best friend since the third grade, you find out that they list their property with, someone else, an agent they've never even heard of. It's like, I'm curious. I love that. But to have just I've had a number of conversations with folks and say, hey, I'm not being messy here. I'm just true care and concern. When you listed your property or through the process of selling your home, Did your agent ever have a conversation with you about safety? About after open house, be a set of eyes and make sure that the windows are locked and that all your, before the open house, that all your things are locked up or put away? Or did your agent talk to you about what to do if someone shows up at your front door claiming they have an appointment to see that property and you need to get out right then? And never once. Not that I have all this scientific, research on the topic, but safety is such an uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable because we don't practice it, conversation to have, that we shy away from anything that might remotely make people feel uncomfortable. And so it leaves people vulnerable.
Well, that's why the foundation work that you're doing with the Beverly Carter Foundation is so important. Since I've now learned it, I am on all your social media, Facebook, you're on Instagram, the BeverlyCarterFoundation.org website. There are so many tools which I think warrant. Obviously, realtors should familiarize themselves with safety precautions for every aspect of our job. But if you are any consumer who knows a realtor, who loves a realtor, who has a realtor in their home, you really should take a minute to start that dialogue. When the realtors need to continue the dialogue to make sure that they know this is in the safety of everyone.
Absolutely.
What I'm thinking about through the conversation, Carl, I've got to say thank you, because I'm sitting here, I've heard the story, I've known the story, we followed it, we're a huge supporter of your foundation. My mom is a real estate broker in Wyoming. And I'm sitting here trying to put myself in that position that you and your family faced, this horrible tragedy. And there are two outcomes that could have developed. One, you could have put your head in the sand and shriveled up and holed up in your home and had that internal hell with just you and your family. Or two, look at what you did, right? You gave other people a voice. People were coming out of the woodwork saying, look, I found myself in these situations. Look, you're bringing an awareness to a serious situation and concern. You didn't have to do that. And so I just want to say thank you, because if I were in the same position, I'm sitting there thinking myself, I'm like, I don't know if I would have the strength. I don't know that I could find that in me. And look at what you've done. And your mom is smiling down. And you have you created a voice for not only so many people in the business, but our industry as a whole. And so we have an opportunity now to continue that and help you continue your mom's legacy. And so I just want to say thank you, because this whole time I'm just, wow, you've done so much for so many.
Thank you. Thank you. I always say, I loved her so much.
Yeah.
And it was ripped from me. And so it's just like the energy had to go somewhere, and it could have, like you said, I refuse to let it destroy me, and I'm all emotional. It's all your fault. So thank you for that. I love what we're doing, though. We have a board that's geographically diverse. It's diverse from people in their positions within the industry, from mortgage to title to just all over the gamut. And it's 100% volunteer. And I will admit, navigating the virus has thrown me with this nonprofit, because, for example, I'm big on, pushing open house safety. And so I'm really trying to be very sensitive to the fact that most agents can't conduct open houses right now. So, I find like all of us, we're all pivoting, right? So I'm trying not to, I never want our message to seem ill-timed or, insensitive. So, but anyone that wants to enter.
Just so you know, Carl, it's not ill-timed. You said something today that really impacted me about now is the time to start the dialogue, right? As we are focused on safety, we are doing new safety measures in many cases about how we're navigating open houses, how we're navigating listing appointments. This is a reminder for us to open the dialogue about realtor safety, which isn't just realtor safety. It should be realtor and consumer safety through the process of buying and selling a home. The legacy of your mom shines a spotlight on that. And we need to start talking. If you're not already having those conversations, let today be the spotlight, let Carl's story. Yeah.
I love it.
Well, Carl, so yeah, we're so grateful. Could you share with everybody where they can find you online one more time?
Absolutely. So we have our website, and it is beverlycarterfoundation.org. If there's, you know, I know, like, right, it's another website, another thing to do. But if you go there, if there's a part of the website to bookmark, go there. There's a training tab and then downloadable resources. It has just a list of one-pagers. So you could just hit a one-pager whenever you're get back to your sales meetings, or if you're still doing your sales meetings via Zoom, pop those in there. I'm really proud of just last week, put a new one up for a safety checklist for property managers. So I'm glad to see that we're starting to expand our training offerings there. We are on social media, of course. I think that we put out probably our most robust training materials on Facebook, but we do have good tips that we put out on Instagram as well. And then I'm not just saying this, this organization is really for the benefit of all of us, and anyone that wants to engage with us, I welcome that, up to and including if there have been agents I've talked to in the past and they have a willingness to share their story, and they feel like that would be therapeutic to them to bring kind of a purpose from their pain. And we are here to help you navigate that process too, at your comfort level. So please engage with us.
Thank you, Carl Carter. And I've also tagged, we have here the tag to the Beverly Carter Foundation, and you're an inspiration, you and your entire family. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you guys so much.
Stay safe, friend.
Stay safe. Have a great
Bye.
weekend. See you soon.
Bye.